This one captures attention, but I want to call out we have a currency collapse in Iran at this point. The actual humanitarian story behind this, you can read it in the newspaper, but the actual effect on this is millions of people being pushed into like subsistence level poverty. It is a uh, I would just call it a catastrophic story as far as what this means for just human dignity, human respect. We see these headlines, we talk about them, but I just want to get across like the real world uh, outputs of all of this geopolitical activity going on. At the end of the day, there's people who are really suffering out of this. So keep that in mind. I know this isn't something where it's like, all right, you see the Sarah McLachlan dogs commercial, you call them, you save a dog. It doesn't do anything. But I think the right approach here, the right outcome is to hopefully provide economic stability, get through this as soon as possible because there is real human suffering going on, a lot of it. So as much of that as we can prevent, the better, in my opinion. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. This is going to be a very difficult kind of untangling or just kind of resetting of a essentially one of the non-top four, I'd say at this point, like civilizational blocks, if you will. Talk about US, Europe, Russia, and China at the front. But what Persia represents, or Iran, in modern times, it's one of those big blocks of civilizations that's just, it's going through one of its own downturns. So I don't know. All of this is for naught. There's nothing most of us can do to change this, but I want to see, um, yeah, hopefully a positive outcome or a reestablishment of stability as soon as possible. All right. So the core headline here: this is a money story at the end of the day, and I'll get to the why, in my opinion. But you're seeing the inflation rate or the loss of purchasing power of the Iranian rial. You see this start to spike in 2018, 2019, and it just continues to this very day to the point where essentially you're looking at a true Weimar level inflation hitting this society. Same thing we've seen in other countries in the last 5 to 10 years, Argentina, Turkey, etc. But Iran, I think, is starting to represent. I mean, it's hitting the low. It's a new level of human suffering, I think, taking place versus, Turkey. You've still got employment, you've still got industry. People are able to get by and kind of absorb, deal with the inflation, the breakdown in the currency. Argentina didn't do as well. They don't have that same industry, footprint that, say, Turkey had, but they at least have a new leader with Malay. People are voting a government in. You're seeing early sweeps. That situation is starting to look better. Not solved by any means yet, but it's on. It looks like at least now the people are seeing hope and a positive outlook. Iran, this is a new low. What we're seeing this week, in my opinion, and I'll get into that. I want to get into first to set this. This is a Keynes quote representing the United Kingdom in talks with Russia and Yugoslavia here in this photo. But I want to get into this, what's actually going on. Keynes ascribes this quote to Lenin. There's no reporter who ever like cited Lenin as saying this. So Keynes is just referencing them third hand. So we can just describe this just as well to Keynes. But this quote: "There is no subtler, no surer means of overturning the existing basis of society than to debauch the currency." That's in effect what's going on in Iran. Like it's a social collapse. The economy stops functioning when a currency breaks down. If you look at the Iranian rial, this is just the last decade or so chart. You see, essentially after, JCPOA, addressing the Iran nuclear problem, development of nuclear weapons potentially. After Trump pulled out of that Obama era, agreement that the U.S. negotiated alongside three European, core powers, UK, France, and Germany. We'll just call them the E3. That's what they're referencing them by in the headlines these days. And then China was actually party to this as well. Trump pulled out of this in 2018, and you start to see on this currency chart, Iran starts to manage itself to a dollar peg. You think about the de-dollarization trend. There's a lot missing from that narrative. I think that a lot of the social media influencers are just, hammering on with that one. But essentially, what we saw here in the last week was the full collapse of that dollar peg. So Iranian rial, you've got a full-on currency collapse at this point. What we just saw is I said this earlier, but a true Weimar-style inflationary outcome for these peoples. How did we get here? I want to get on that. If everybody remembers, back in June, we had those bunker busters, dropped on the Fordow and a couple of other Iranian nuclear enrichment facilities. Effectively, just presuming that those strikes were effective, which is, up for debate within the intelligence community, military community, all of that. But just the outcome of those strikes was essentially to take the pretext of all of this just warmongering that's been developing over Iran for 20 years at this point. Basically, my entire lived adolescent and adult life, taking off the nuclear enrichment, abilities, destruction of centrifuges, etc., was basically, in the long term, completely crippling or handicapping Iran's ability to further pursue nuclear weapons. It's an important development, not just for what it represents for Iran, domestically and all the power factions there, but also the international superpowers who cite that issue as the casus belli, if you will, for further kinetic intervention in Iran. So we had those strikes taken off the map. We'll get back into that. The JCPOA, that wasn't the end of it, though, as we'll see in just a second. And this is just in the recent past in everybody's memory. But also something I want to call out, before we saw those strikes on Fordow and other facilities in Iran, late June, about a week before it, I think the headline was like June 18th, Iran saw its largest crypto exchange, the Nobitex, I think is the name of it, hacked, and basically, another one of these crypto heists where $90 million, I thought it was more than that, was basically just stolen from these exchanges. But you see the pairing here, right? This is not just Joe Schmo, civilian infrastructure, a couple of teenage boys, on Minecraft server, whatever, like running a hack on Iran's largest crypto exchange. This is intelligence. Or military, right? This is part of that operation, in my opinion. Now, was it the same people? Was it the U.S., et cetera? Maybe not. It was, I think, the actual group that claimed responsibility was actually Israeli. The point is, the same degree that the nuclear infrastructure or the uranium enrichment infrastructure captured the headlines as like an actual target of the operation, start thinking about the attack on the monetary infrastructure, the crypto, the Nobitex. There was a bank as well, Bank Sapa, we highlighted it back in June. That was tied to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, if I remember correctly. These things were all part of that same operation. So my point here, nuclear issues like further nuclear proliferation, yes, important, but think about these things in terms of the money, back to that original Keynes and Lenin quote. And I think we'll start to develop a better kind of footing and bearing in reality as things get more and more confusing as the volatility continues to accelerate. Um, so now those things are done in June. What do we start seeing as soon as July, August? Um, Remember, I talked about the JCPOA, this Obama era agreement that gave some abilities to use further sanctions to push back on Iran's ability to develop nuclear weapons. Um, After these facilities were all, zeroed, obliterated by these bunker busters, the JCPOA sanctions, the members, the E3, and then China also went along with the vote, I believe, or wasn't able to stop it at the very least. I don't know if they voted with the E3. Um, Important detail. I should have known for y'all, but those sanctions started to go into effect, or started to being pushed to go into effect about like July, August, after those bombings took place. Reason for that, the JCPOA was actually a 10-year deal. Part of the reason Trump said this is a terrible deal, this makes no sense. There's a 7-point argument for why this thing was no good from the U.S. perspective, and he, backstopped his decision to withdraw from that agreement in 2018. This thing expired on October 18th of 2025. So had the E3 allowed that window to lapse, they would have never been able to use these JCPOA sanctions. It was just kind of a use it or lose it type of thing. So the the drumbeat starts rolling like August. It starts showing up in the United Nations Security Council. These things go into effect by October, right? So as of October, the Iranian regime, which was already under sanctions, it's already struggling. It's trying to keep its currency soft pegged to the dollar. Once those sanctions show up, that means imports, exports, international trade. Iran's ability to um, basically be serviced as a customer through the legacy capital markets infrastructure, the systems, that disappears. And once that economic activity goes bye-bye, that's when you start seeing the financial collapse accelerate. So, Cameron, next slide. This is where you start getting to that development. The Ayanda Bank gets forced merged in with one of Iran's, I think it is Iran's largest bank, the Bank Melli, um, on October 24th. Why did that have to happen? Essentially, this Ayanda Bank was already insolvent, like multiple times over, right? It had loans that were going bad. One of
Yeah, describe one of them,
um,
Matt.
the more popular loans here, we'll get into it, was to this Iran mall, which actually ate up a lot of the bank's balance sheet capacity. Believe it or not, Iran and everything you've known about them for 10, 20 years built chose to finance and invest its own capital infrastructure in this Iran mall, which was actually the world's largest shopping center. It's unfathomable to believe this, right? We think in America, a Mall of America, talk about peak consumer culture, right?
Dubai has
Where
a
would you
big
not
mall, but
expect it
yeah.
to be? Iran. Well, no, you'd be wrong. It was in Iran. They built this thing in the 2010s. Um, the Ayanda Bank held a lot of the debt, and just peak stupid decisions, I guess. Like you choose to invest your resources in this thing. Um, it just is like shockingly, uh, uh, I mean, poor management, capital misallocation, et cetera, malinvestment to its core from the Austrian perspective. But anyway, once all that economic activity disappears, this luxury mall, dries up. No one has any money. They're not in there buying the European designer handbags, all that fancy stuff. This debt goes bad, and it goes bad very quickly. So they have to get the Iranian kind of monetary authorities. They force the merger of this Ayanda Bank, into Bank Melly. And then the only way that they could paper over it was to literally print money. So that's where you start getting the currency breakdown, right? And you get true Weimar-style printing. And the even the mainstream outlets are starting to piece this one together. I think we're just, for everybody who's like, why is there civil unrest going on around? Why are we talking about, you know, um, another Shah Pahlavi coming in as a proposal to, you know, reestablish stability. Where does the Ayatollah Khamenei come into all of this stuff? At the end of the day, this is a monetary story, in my opinion. You've got a complete collapse of the currency at this point. This doesn't get better for anyone involved until you reestablish currency stability on the ground. So there's multiple ways you can do it. Um, there's good ways, there's bad ways. The status quo though is just continue to muddle through. Now, um, when I say muddle through, what do we mean by that? On the ground, people are choosing over the last, let's say, 15, 16, 17 years since Bitcoin arrived. Slowly, people are opting into these alternative rails, this alternative monetary framework. Sometimes it's out of speculation. We can see the chart on Bitcoin. It's boom and bust, but the trend is up and to the right. There's a lot of draw, from wealthy countries, people in developed markets who just want to speculate, get rich, etc. But there's also cases and stories like Iran and other kind of emerging markets where political and monetary stability do not exist, where people are reaching out to this as kind of the life raft of last resort. So you're turning to Bitcoin and dollar stable coins as a credible alternative to what we think about as, state or yes, state operated or from a Westphalian order nation state, framework, monetary structures, the crypto rails, and what the kind of internet adoption over the last 30 to 40 years has provided the basis for. You're seeing segments of the population gradually but meaningfully adopt this as the muddle through as an option, just assuming the foreign powers, the internal domestic parties like the IRGC, the mullahs, etc., the military in Iran, if no one can come in and emerge to establish order, I think in this point, like Bitcoin is like the clock is on its side. Stable coins, the clock is on its side as well. So you're seeing those cryptocurrency reserves that Nobitex kind of represented, the Bitcoin reserves, as a key kind of piece in establishing monetary order, which now if you roll back the tape 7 months, why did that hack take place before even the nuclear facilities were attacked? It's about a money and monetary stability within a population, in my attention, or in my opinion. And you just kind of work forwards from there. Now, who's the winner and loser here? I really hate to say that or think about it that way, because the the people bearing the brunt of this are the Iranian people. And it is like vastly more important than anything else that I think the world, everybody else involved, does what it can to resolve this problem as soon as possible for those millions of people of suffering's benefit. That's not the way the world works, though. Sadly, this is going to have to work itself out, most likely with a lot of pain, is the very unfortunate reality. But who stands to gain here? See Israel at the top of the list, but I'd say United States here. A new regime in place for the United States would represent a government that would actually be open to dialogue and working with the United States, which is not the status quo. Like the United States has no footprint in this region. They don't like the government of Iran has to operate through Qatar and Oman as a mediary to get anything done in this region. So I guess a new political regime, if you will, any change is kind of viewed as a strategic victory for the U.S. And also that status quo, further Bitcoin adoption in Iran, and then U.S. dollar stablecoin in Iran. You could say that's also a positive for we talk, back to our original story, right? The two sides lining up in the U.S. You got the Fed dollar and the Treasury stablecoin dollar. Treasury stablecoin adoption within Iran is good for one side within the political and monetary upheaval that's taking place in the U.S. itself. So these stories everywhere in the world, if you look at it, you can connect the dots usually in one way or the other. Now the big losers here, you would actually say the EU. You've got potentially a refugee crisis in an EU situation that has already taken a lot of refugee mass migration, which is already starting to cause, let's just say, unrest within Europe itself. Um, and another loser here, you would say, would be Russia, as a strategic partner. We talk about a lot of drone equipment coming in from Iranian production in this, kinetic war on the battlefield in Ukraine, et cetera. A lot of the kind of war munitions in this era of warfare is potentially at risk with what we see on the ground in Iran. So this is a touch and go situation. It doesn't resolve itself, in my opinion, until you reestablish monetary stability in Iran. You can just sort through the list of outcomes here. What are the things that can be done? They range from like absolutely 0% chance of being long run effective. So the highest probability is redenomination, right? Just think about this as a reverse stock split of your currency. You got $100 million Iranian rial note, just strike off some zeros from the printing press and just put hundreds on those now. Don't accept the old bills. Problem solved, right? Like that never works. All the way down to full dollarization, currency board, a digital rial CBDC. Those are all going to be very hard to get done, except for a CBDC. You can launch a
Who's gonna
CBDC,
use it though? Yeah.
today, but no one's going to adopt. It's garbage. That won't work. Gold standard. Iran actually has pretty sizable mineral resources, so gold, copper. They could get into the game of mining, if you will, and metals production. The problem is you don't have the economic stability to attract investment to get production spun up. They lack the technology to do it. So foreign capital and gold, silver, copper miners, et cetera, are hesitant, extremely hesitant to come in and invest their own resources into that production just because of that lack of political, monetary, and economic stability, legal stability as well, rule of law in the region itself. So it's all, chicken before egg type of problem. How do you get to a situation? How do you set a framework where you have all the core ingredients. You've got people. There's a lot of highly educated people in Iran. You've got a smart population. They're among the smartest people I've ever met. The ones I've went to graduate school with, et cetera. You've got all the ingredients except for order, if you will. So how do you get there? That's the I keep wanting to say $1 million question, but in inflation, what do you like? It's the quadrillion dollar question, right?
Yeah.
That's the question. That's the tough thing. And I think in the long run, this is where I think, Cameron, myself, a lot of other people who see Bitcoin as that monetary solution are still in a tiny, tiny minority, right? When I asked Perplexity here to come up with the possible paths towards establishing monetary stability in Iran, comes up with these 10. I was like, where's the Bitcoin and US dollar stablecoin solution? And it goes through with all these long-winded answers why that's not viable. It's like, all right, I think the training here is reflecting the model's own bias. And I worked, batting the tennis ball off the wall, if you will, with the AI as a sparring partner. But like others, it's too volatile, criminal activity, et cetera. It's like, all right, that's cool. We'll keep muddling through. The downside is a lot of people are going to suffer through this, which makes it very hard. But I think on the other side of it, hopefully there's a brighter future for, this generation's children, grandchildren, et cetera. Um, just you hope for the best in terms of what it takes to get there. But that's the way that's the way I see it. And
Well, and I want to point out
we're not,
counterpoint to what you're
yeah,
hearing from Perplexity and bouncing ideas off and kind of challenging the model. I think you added this slide in here. January 15th, 2026. I think this is furthering your point, right? Of this is we're past the cutoff window in a lot of models. If you're just looking at what is the media telling you, what is history telling me, you're not seeing the new trends that are coming out, especially around crypto and specifically the hash piece of the title here.
yep, exactly. So yeah, chain analysis, you know, may or may not be an intelligence community cutout. That's for kind of everybody else to decide for themselves. But yeah, they are starting to cite. You're starting to see this show up in this opinion or perspective represented in the kind of the popular headlines. Hey, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency adoption is actually uh, um, pretty deeply rooted in Iran, and it's definitely has its foot in the game. Now, it is uh, heavily used, tied to, et cetera, kind of their Praetorian Guard, the IRGC. I think there's a lot of players at stake in Iran. They're kind of in that knives type of era, as it looks like the religious revolution, et cetera, the 1979 kind of era is um, coming to its own logical conclusion, and Iran is getting ready to begin a kind of a new era in its own, multi uh, millennium history as a civilizational peoples. So continue to watch. This is going to unfold quickly, but at its core, this is a printing and hashing story, as well as a humanitarian crisis. So keep watching this closely. Things will develop, and I think 2026 will continue to be a very interesting year.